Okay, so get this. We are diving into some seriously weird listener mail today.
Definitely strange.
Like, have you ever wondered what happens when, like, fandom goes a little too far? We're talking about a listener who didn't just request, a show topic. This listener, they tried to write themselves into the entire episode.
Yeah, you're right. It is a fascinating look at, I think, how the lines between, audience and creator really are getting blurred, especially in the digital age. And this isn't, like someone saying, oh, play my song, play my song. This is different. This gets into questions of, control, right? Authenticity and the very nature of how we see ourselves online, parasocial relationships, all of that.
Yeah, and we're talking like full-blown dialogue, stage directions. They even tried to like script our reactions for us. It was like, honestly, it was like getting a movie treatment from a fan who really, really wants to be in the movie.
And that desire for, control, for like shaping the narrative, that's really telling. It makes you think about how much of what we see online, I mean, think about it from those, perfectly posed photos you see everyone doing to those viral videos, how much of it is driven by this kind of almost primal need to curate an image, a persona, instead of just existing, instead of just being.
Okay, so rewind. A few weeks ago, this email, it pops up in our inbox. And the subject line, ready for this? Pre-written script.
Oh, wow.
Short, to the point. And I'm not gonna lie, just a tad ominous.
Yeah, I mean, even just seeing that, it does suggest a certain level of, I don't want to say aggressiveness, but assertiveness for sure. Maybe even a need to kind of dictate the terms of the interaction right from the get-go,
Right. And inside the email is literally one sentence. Quote, please read the script word for word in the next show. Best regards. And get this, Boss.
Boss.
Not the real name, obviously. But you got to admit, the pseudonym, it adds to the whole mystery.
Definitely. I mean, even the choice to use a name like Boss, that's significant. It immediately establishes a certain power dynamic, even in this very first message. It's like they're trying to take the reins from the very beginning.
Totally. So naturally, we're hooked, right? So we open the attachment, and there it is, a full-blown podcast script, complete with intro music cues, dialogue for both of us. They even tried to capture our usual back and forth banter.
Which, as we'll see, is where things get really, really interesting. Because in trying to, mimic our natural dynamic, the script actually highlights how artificial and manufactured it all feels.
Oh, absolutely. For instance, there's this part where Boss has me saying, and I quote, well, that's a new one for us, followed by this big hearty laugh.
The forced laughter, it's really a common thing we see in situations like this. It's like they understand that laughter is part of a natural conversation, but they're trying to insert it strategically, and it ends up, it just feels robotic and unnatural.
Exactly. Like they read a how to be a podcast host manual, but completely miss the chapter on, just organic human interaction. But hold on, because it gets even weirder. So woven into this meticulous script is a listener letter section, right?
Yeah.
And it's just overflowing with compliments. You'd think we'd be flattered, right?
Here's the thing about those compliments, though. They're very generic. There's no mention of specific episodes or topics we've talked about. Jokes, inside jokes, nothing. There's nothing in there that demonstrates a genuine connection to us or our work.
It's like saying, you're a fantastic chef. But not being able to name, a single dish you've made, it just feels off.
Totally. It's giving off major love bombing vibes, which, in case anyone's unfamiliar, it's a term used to describe this kind of over-the-top praise, and it can actually be a red flag. And not just in, your personal life, but even in a parasocial context like this one. It's often a way to try to manipulate someone into feeling indebted or obligated.
Which brings us to the most bizarre part of this whole saga, the dinner invitation. And get this, a completely out-of-left-field job offer. Just casually dropped into the script as if it were the most normal thing in the world. And trust me, you are going to want to stick around to hear how they tried to script our response to that one. Because wow, it's like the boss went from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds flat,
Right. And the way they try to script our response to this completely out-of-the-blue proposition is, let's just say it's interesting.
It's more than interesting. It's kind of unnerving when you think about it.
It is a little bit, yeah. It's like they're trying to anticipate and control our every reaction, which honestly is kind of the opposite of what you want in a genuine interaction.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Instead of having us just come right out and address the elephant in the room, this whole thing with a stranger inviting themselves into our lives, the script has us tiptoeing around it with these very carefully worded lines like, wow, that's incredibly kind of you to offer, but we'd love to get to know you a little better first.
Yeah, you can practically see the thought bubbles.
Oh, totally. Like, let's just hit the pause button on this whole best friends forever narrative for a hot second.
Exactly. And I think this kind of careful backpedaling, it highlights just how complicated and potentially fraught these parasocial relationships can be.
No kidding. On the one hand, you want to acknowledge and appreciate your listeners' enthusiasm, right? But on the other hand, you need to establish and maintain those boundaries.
It's a delicate dance for sure.
And in this case, the dance floor is a pre-written podcast script.
Which, let's be honest, is a whole other level of strange. But it does raise some interesting questions, like, what's driving this need for such a high level of control, you know? Why not just send a regular old email expressing admiration, maybe suggesting a meetup? Why go through all the effort of scripting an entire podcast interaction?
Right, like, hey, huge fan, would love to chat sometime if you're open to it. Totally normal. But this elaborate script, this attempt to dictate not just their words, but ours as well, that hints at something a little, I don't know, a little deeper going on.
It's almost as if they're trying to create this, like, perfectly curated experience, and not just for themselves, but for us as the hosts, too. And to me, that really ties into this larger trend we see everywhere online, where authenticity is often overshadowed by this pressure to craft a specific image or persona.
Totally. This whole pressure to appear witty, charming, always on, even in a medium as seemingly casual as podcasting.
And that's what makes this whole scripted interaction so fascinating to unpack, I think, because it really exposes the artificiality of that performance, you know? Right. It peels back the curtain and kind of reveals the strings being pulled. It makes you question how much of what we see online is truly genuine versus, you know, carefully constructed for an audience.
Right. Like that saying, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Except online, those battles are often fought not with swords and shields, but with perfectly filtered photos and meticulously crafted tweets.
It's true, and sometimes those meticulously crafted tweets even come in the form of pre-written podcast scripts. But I think you're right, whether it's online or offline, we all present these polished versions of ourselves to the world, and it makes you wonder what's really going on beneath the surface. And, you know, that's what makes this whole situation so thought-provoking, I think. It forces us to confront the increasingly blurred lines between reality and performance in the digital age, and to consider how far we're willing to go to find that sense of connection.
Well said. And to our mystery scriptwriter, the boss, if you're out there listening, we're still genuinely curious. What inspired this whole elaborate production? What were you hoping to achieve? Because at the end of the day, this deep dive isn't about judging or dismissing someone's actions, right? It's about using this unusual situation as a lens to examine our own behavior online, the personas we create, and the ways in which we seek connection in a world that's increasingly mediated by technology. And you know how sometimes things get even weirder than you thought possible? Well, buckle up, because just when we thought this whole boss situation had run its course, they hit us with a plot twist, a follow-up email that added a whole other layer to this whole thing.
You're not kidding. That second email really got the wheels turning, made us think about their motives even more.
Right. So remember, we'd gone through the whole script, analyzed it, dissected the whole control aspect, everything.
It was a full-on deep dive into the boss.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there was one thing we hadn't done. We hadn't actually read their script, like out loud.
Which, when you put yourself in the boss's shoes, must have been a little anticlimactic for them.
Oh, for sure. I mean, they poured their heart and soul into crafting this perfect podcast moment, right?
Right.
And then, crickets.
So the boss emails back.
Oh boy, here we go.
And they're surprisingly cool about the whole thing. They're like, hey, no worries, totally understand. If you weren't comfortable reading my masterpiece on air, it was just for practice anyway.
Just for practice. Casual, right.
Right, as if they hadn't just tried to write us into their own little radio drama.
But then, just when you think they're about to let it go, bam, they hit us with this curveball.
Oh yeah, I remember this part.
They say, but, you know, if you guys have a free minute, I'd still love to hear it brought to life, you know, by your voices. Maybe just a run through. Nothing too serious.
No pressure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And hey, don't be ashamed to, you know, really show your feelings, let those emotions flow. Like, come on.
It's amazing how they're trying to spin it as this casual collaboration. Like, we're suddenly supposed to be giving notes on a promising young screenwriter's breakout piece.
My Hollywood-ready script.
But I think underneath it all, you can hear this real need for validation. Like, they just wanted to see their vision come to life, even if it was just us reading it in a tiny sound booth somewhere.
And yeah, maybe just a teensy bit of that control thing creeping back in there too. Like, I'm still calling the shots, even if I'm pretending not to.
Absolutely. It's like this weird power play disguised as a collaborative project. And honestly, it brings up a question that a lot of content creators grapple with. How do you balance being respectful of your audience's enthusiasm, that passion, with the need to maintain boundaries?
Because, you want to connect with your listeners, build that community, but not at the expense of feeling like you're giving up control of your own creative space.
Exactly. And in this case, I think that meant politely declining the boss's generous offer to, direct our podcast.
Which I think we can all agree was the only sane option. But hey, this whole boss saga, it just underscores something we talk about a lot on the show, doesn't it? The increasingly blurry lines between our online and offline selves, and the very human need for connection, even when it takes on these, unorthodox forms.
Totally. And I think it reminds us all that while the internet can be this incredible tool for building community, it's important to proceed with a healthy dose of caution and a strong sense of self-preservation.
Couldn't agree more. But hey, on that note, maybe it's time to wrap things up. Big thanks to everyone for joining us on this deep dive.
Until next time.
Stay curious, everyone.